welcome again to everybody for coming to find out more about rural touring as part of Village Halls Week. It is fantastic to see so many of you here. If you're not aware of the Nrtf and what we do, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about us. So the Nrtf is a network that supports rural arts and touring. We have over 500 members. Rural touring is about levelling out of opportunities to access and be involved in high quality creative cultural experiences in mainly rural and non-city based areas. We support all of our members in so many different ways, such as we run an annual conference, we subsidise and present training, we offer professional development opportunities, we support schemes with grants to find out and seek new work, we undertake sector research, as well as deliver genre and venue development projects. We also advocate for the sector at government level, and funders. We offer advice and help to artists and promoters, and we do loads of communications and lots more. Steffi, who is with us today, is going to talk to you about who else is with us and who will be talking, and also who is involved in rural touring and TF. As we said before, if you think of any questions, please put your questions in the chat. And we will get to as many as possible. Steffi, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to talk about rural touring as if you've never heard about it at all before, very quickly. Rural touring is effectively delivered by three key people or groups of people. So that's the rural touring schemes, the village hall or rural venue promoters, or library promoters as well, and the artists. And the way it works is a scheme are the arts professionals in this who will be the ones that program the artist. So if you're an artist looking to get rural touring, it's the schemes you contact first. They then work with their promoters to work out which show fits best for which village hall, and the promoters are then the ones that organise the event and get the audiences to come in. So that's it in a nutshell. Today we are joined on this call by some really experienced rural touring promoters. For those of you who are from rural venues looking to get involved, we thought you might want to hear directly from them. And we're also joined by some rural touring artists who will tell you a bit about how they got started in rural touring and their top tips. And there's also myself and Holly. I also work for a scheme. I work for Spot on Lancashire, the rural and library touring scheme up in Lancashire, and we can field your questions as well. So that's it in a nutshell. We've got lots of resources that I'll share in the chat that go in a lot deeper than we might be able to get in an hour. But if you ever need any questions, pop them in the chat and I will share my details at the end as well.
Thank you, Steffi. And why don't we have our speakers introduce themselves, tell us a bit about what you do, and give us your top tip or something you wish that you'd known when you started out on your rural touring adventure. So why don't we start with Tom, who is a promoter but also the chair of the Nrtf. Welcome, Tom.
Good afternoon. I shall keep it brief. So I'm a promoter in a little village in the north of Cumbria called Castle Carrick, and my village hall, I've been doing it about 15 years, probably put on about 40 or 50 shows over those years. And so I work with a scheme called Highlights, which covers most of Cumbria, County Durham, the rural parts of County Durham and Northumberland as well. And my hall has a capacity of about 70 and has no stage, but it does have lights. And I think my top tip would be always never underestimate how important heating is nice and early, so that when people arrive, be they the audience, be they the artists, be they you, in fact, warmth makes the world go round.
It's a really good one. Thanks, Tom. Let's go to an artist next. Stephan.
Hello, my name's Stephan Escrite. I run Ragged Edge Productions, which is also up in Cumbria, having worked in theatre for a long time and had many experiences of rural touring before I set up the company. So I've been a performer, I've been a technician, I've been a director for other companies, I've been a script developer for other companies, and briefly I was a promoter as well. Yes, I confess I was a promoter. Then I set up Ragged Edge Productions a few years ago, and we've now done 3 national tours of our first show, the Chef Show. I'll put the website address into the chat to save time here. You can see the nuts and bolts of what we do on the website, which is currently being upgraded, but everything's there. Top tip, I'll cheat. That invites a confession about something you got wrong. I forgot to remember to make the set really light. And I knew this and I forgot. So our artists, you want them to give 100% in the performance. If they're exhausted because the staging's too heavy, then that's not a good thing. So by the time we did our 3rd tour, I was choosing venues, prioritizing venues that had the capacity to take our set without us erecting the raised stage that we had. The other quick tip I would have is, if you're new to rural touring, it's fantastic in terms of the financial side of having a guarantee. If you're a new company trying to forge a reputation in small scale touring, it's really scary doing those box office splits in studio theatres and other venues. Whereas, however minimal, and they're not always minimal, but the guaranteed fee you get on the rural touring scheme is a fantastic way of having some sort of assurance as you put the finances together. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephan. Brilliant top tip. Let's go to Wendy in Devon. You need to unmute, Wendy.
Sorry, it's just because I had a phone call at the same time and I was like, what do I do? Anyway, sorry, yes. My name's Wendy. I am a promoter and I have been for donkey's years, about 20 years now, with Villages in Action. So I'm in East Devon, and we've got the village hall here in Stockland, which has about, you can get about 100 in comfortably. We also got the outdoor area, which we use as well, and the church and the pub. So it's great. So I would say to any other promoters to utilise other spaces within the village, and that way you can pull in other volunteers to help as well. So that's great. What else was I going to say? Top tips. Top tip is to make sure you delegate, because I was always rubbish at that, and actually it can get quite stressful. But if you now use the online ticketing, which is brilliant, and you can get other people from different organisations to help you, then that's fantastic. Also decorate. I've got a great big window, and it's wonderful to put the advertising up in that, and write things and update it and say, come and see this, or tickets nearly sold out. Anyway, that's me. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. That was great. It's definitely worth working with as many people as possible, and delegation is something we probably all need to learn. Next, let's go to Barbara, who is a promoter down in Cornwall.
Hello, my name is Barbara Truman. I've been a volunteer promoter in Cornwall for over 30 years, the last 20 with Can't Cove, our wonderful rural touring scheme. Top tips. I think the main tip that I would say is communication is really vital. The key to what we as promoters do is, in the name, we are volunteers. We're not, most of us have any particular in-depth knowledge about the things that we should probably be better served if we were, but we don't. We do it volunteer. It's fun enjoyment, bringing theatre to our local communities. So communication is really vital. Not panicking promoters into giving a huge technical specification, or if you do, softening the blow and talking people through it. But just communication, and as I say, remembering that promoters are volunteers, and it's a different type of touring, but it's great fun and well worth doing.
Thank you, Barbara. Brilliant. Next, we're going to go to artist, producer, Nick Pollard.
Hi everyone. Sorry, the recycling van's chosen this moment to be in the road and make everyone else cross. So sorry if you hear that. Yeah, my name's Nick. I'm a freelance theatre director and director of Up the Road Theatre. We're a small-scale touring theatre company. We're based in Kent, but I live in Hertfordshire. Slightly cheeky, I know, but what can you do? We're funded on a project-by-project basis, so finances is something that we always have to think about. We've done 2 tours now that have engaged with rural touring. We're currently in our R&D for our 3rd production, which we hope will really engage with rural touring. It is great. It is a really good thing to do. I grew up in a village myself. We never had professional theatre, so I think it's a really valuable thing. But one thing I would say, and this is also a bit like Stephan, something I didn't fully think about, the way it works, as Steffi said, is there's schemes that you apply to. Now it's a bit like applying to a venue to perform, in that you don't know that you're going to get dates with them. The dates aren't guaranteed. You might say, we're going to be in your area for these 5 dates, but we'd like to have 3 with you. You aren't guaranteed any number of dates with them. So if you're more of a kind of a gigging mentality with your touring, then that might well be fine. But if more like me, you're more like engaging actors for a certain amount of time, you need to make sure that your finances and your kind of the practicalities can manage or mitigate the fact that you might find that you're going to be in this county for a week, but you've only got 2 or 3 dates. You know, in your planning stages, you need to be able to find other ways to either make up those dates or do something with the finances. When it works, it's brilliant, but it does need some thinking about if that's your way of working. And I echo what Barbara said about communication, particularly if you're working with non-theatre spaces, which is what we've done a lot of, and we love doing that. Boatyards, boathouses, whatever, coal mines. They sometimes need that little bit more communication. But yeah, we're Up the Road Theatre. If I can answer any questions, you want to drop me a line, we've got a website. Probably don't go through social media because I won't see it for about 6 months. But yeah, drop me an email if you'd like, if I can help you in any way.
Thanks, Nick. That's brilliant. And we're going to finish with 2 David. So I'm going to go to David Lane, who is a promoter in the Midlands. David.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, I'm David Lane, promoter in Christchurch, Derbyshire. We've put on just over 50 shows in the last 8 years, a lot through rural touring, but also ones we've done ourselves. We're a non-theatre space. It's a community centre, L-shaped, which has its challenges. My strongest tip to promoters is to feed the artists well. Give them a good meal. Don't give them half a cob. If you do that, you'll have a friend for life. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Everyone, it's the way to your heart, isn't it? Through your stomach. Way to a great performance as well, perhaps. Thank you. Last but not least, we've got David Mine, artist. Where are you, David? David needs to unmute. Actually, I'm not sure he's here now. Sorry.
I think you've lost
David,
him.
We've lost him. Chickened out. That's all right. Okay, so in that case, Steffi, I'm going to just quickly ask you to tell us what a scheme is and how they operate.
Yep, so I just popped in the chat. The way that I think of a scheme is that a scheme is like the theatre or performance arts venue, but instead of having 3 or 4 performance spaces in one building, they use venues across their area. So schemes often run across county areas. So for example, I work in Lancashire. We cover all of Lancashire. So we have venues that take up all shapes and sizes, and they are spread across our county. So if you're an artist, you're thinking of it as approaching an arts venue to get programmed. If you're here as a rural touring promoter or a rural venue, the way it works is that you will also approach that scheme, but to tell them that you're interested in hosting events. And they are the middlemen, effectively. Most of them, if not all of them, currently are funded by Arts Council or Arts Council Wales or Creative Scotland, and they handle a lot of the finances. They're all set up differently as to how much they can cover costs for if you're a venue and you want to book an artist. They may take some of your ticket sales to offset that cost of booking the artist, but it is professional events. So as an artist, you will get paid. As I think Stephan said, it is a guaranteed fee. And like an arts venue, our programs are limited. So we run across certain seasons, and that's different for every scheme. We can't take everyone that applies to us as an artist. It is programmed. There is a programmer within each scheme who will work out what dates they can take, how many artists they can fit in, how many artists their budget affords, and also what dates work well. So like Nick said, she might give a scheme 5 dates to start with. They will then give those 5 dates to their venues. Those venues then come back and say yes or no as to what show they want, what dates work well for them, and they put that jigsaw together. So there is a certain level of uncertainty around all of that, because it takes a lot to put that jigsaw together. But generally speaking, if you're an artist here, once you've been put on the menu, the scheme will do everything they can to fulfill those dates with you, and make sure you're not left out in the lurch. And the other great thing is that the schemes through sort of the Nrtf and through whatever area they're in, they do work well together. So if they can't fulfill one of the 3 dates, they might talk to the scheme that's next door to them, so that you don't have to completely tour to the other side of the country. You're just crossing over the county. So from us in Lancashire, you might go to highlights instead. I think that's everything I can say about schemes as best as possible from both points of view.
Thank you, Steffi. That's brilliant. And David, mine is here. So, David, are you here? Maybe he's having technical difficulties. David, I just let you in. If you're here, you are here. Would you
David?
Hello, hi. Say
me, yes,
and your
hi.
top tip.
David Min, hi. I'm an artist. I'm based down in Penzance in Cornwall. I've been touring rural venues now for over 40 years. Yes, yeah. Firstly with Me High as a company, and then latterly the last 5-6 years doing my own work as a solo performer. I perform great. My top tip would be always charge the battery on your computer. That's why I disappear out of the meeting. Sorry about that. Yeah, top tip for rural touring, be adaptable. I've had to saw a foot off the bottom of my set before, having worked on a tiny little stage. I would also add to what Barbara said before about communication. Make sure you get in touch with the promoter in time and discuss everything, but be adaptable. Okay, that's.
Thank you, David, and we're glad you found your adapter in time.
Yeah.
So we've got loads of questions. Some of you sent in them in advance as well. But first of all, the first question we got was from Christopher Ward from Thunder Road Theatre. Would you like to ask your question?
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
I'm wondering if there are particular trends as to what different performance arts and different theatre genres get sort of good football, good audiences.
Anyone like to talk about the particular trends as to what performance art and what genres of theatre are most popular?
Holly, I don't think everybody will have heard that. The sound quality was dreadful.
Yes. Christopher was asking, are there any particular trends in rural touring as to what performance arts and what genres of theatre are most popular?
So
Say something about Holly if you want.
Tom, yep, go for it, Tom.
I want you to treat my hall as the Royal Albert Hall, or as the most impressive hall that you've ever done your show in. And so why do I say that? Because I want you to be ambitious, and I'm not saying you would, but I don't want you to patronize my rural audience or think that they will only put up with some stuff that you wouldn't normally see in a professional theatre. The reason I say that is because I love it when a show comes to my hall which is surprising, of a genre I've never seen before, and which is unexpected. So I think as far as answering that question is concerned, I just think it has to be really, really good. Whatever it is you're doing, it just has to be really, really good. When you first become a promoter, you're probably, when you're trying to get your 70 people to get a ticket off you and come through your door, probably you're thinking, and you're probably right in thinking, that most people would prefer to see a bit of music, see a nice band play, or see a bloke with a guitar or a lady with a guitar. And you might be right to begin with, but actually rural audiences just like to see really, really good stuff. So I think I've put on in my hall, I put on magic, I put on theatre, I put on music. I've even put on a bit of dance. I put on a show last year that was about being deaf. So I think it's an eclectic selection that works. It just has to be really, really good.
Thank you. Steffi and then David.
Yeah, so from a scheme point of view, we are Arts Council funded, so we have to meet Arts Council funding criteria as well. And that also means that we have to have a balance in our menu of art forms that we cover. So we will be looking at that season after season, and who we're programming, what are we offering our venues. There are some things that we are maybe a little bit more cautious about, but we are moving towards more confidence around sort of things like how much swearing a show has. And that again comes back to you communicating that sort of suitability of your piece for that audience. That's not so much to do with because the audience is rural. As Tom said, rural audiences are just audiences. They just happen to live in nicer green places. But they are going into a venue that feels like home, and that's a venue that they feel very safe in, that they feel very comfortable in, that has a lot of different purposes. And so you have to keep that in mind in terms of content and letting people know what they can expect in that sense. And so we encourage artists to think of it as if they were a film. Are you a PG show? Are you a 15 show? And it just helps us find the right venue for you, find the right promoter for you, and in turn then find the right audience for you as well. So obviously there's some trends. It happens year in, year out. You see that when we go up to Edinburgh Fringe, but generally we are open to anything and everything. And you will find as well, schemes have certain projects where they might be working on at one point on really promoting some spoken word and trying to get some more spoken word into their area. So you can look as well at what other projects those schemes are doing.
Thank you, Steffi. Brilliant, as always. David, Lane.
Yes, I just wanted to build on what Tom said about the type of work that you take into Village Hall. I agree completely with Tom that you shouldn't patronize and play down to rural audiences. I would argue passionately that rural audiences are actually far more eclectic than those in the big city, because they may be seeing one show a month, a quarter in the show, so they will turn out and they want to be thrilled, they want to be surprised, they want to be challenged. You know, we're not in the West End where you can go and see a musical every night of the week. You've got the opportunity to try everything. In our venue, we've had 6 dance shows, every single one sold out. We've had 20 theatre performances and 26 music gigs, all bar 8 sold out. So we had an average audience size of 96 with a capacity of 100. So challenge us, test us, bring us something to really make us think, because that's what the audiences love. They go out saying, wow, I wasn't expecting that, and that's the best accolade of the lot.
Brilliant figures there, David. That's excellent. Quite a few of you are asking about what technical requirements are needed on tour. So I don't know if any of you, who would like to pick up on that? Put your hand up if you're one of our speakers. David, yeah, back to you.
Sorry, yeah.
Barbara. David
yes,
and then Barbara.
Our hall is not a performance space. It's an all-purpose community centre, so we have no stage, we have no wings, we have no lighting, we have nothing. So that actually is a great opportunity, because as long as the communication with the artist starts really early, we can make it work. And David Min brought one of his fabulous shows up to us 3 or 4 years ago, and I met him when he was performing it somewhere else, and we talked about it in the bar about what they needed. David is a one-man show. He brought everything in a suitcase, I think. We've had one dance company that had an 8-hour get-in. So you really need to be talking to understand what the artist wants and needs, and what the venue can provide. Yeah, talk and talk and talk, ask questions, and there is no such thing as a stupid question.
Right, thank you. Barbara, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I wanted to just go back to the last question, just to add, because I'll forget this later, talking about what shows work. Key part of that is also your advertising, which needs to be good. It needs to, you know, so people understand what the show's about, and that's a really key thing to rural touring, so that the audience have got some idea of what the show is. You know, don't go for some vague airy-fairy advertising. It does need to sell the show. But back to the question about technical, yeah, it is down to communication again. It's, if you understand about technical things, you're putting forward something that the recipient, the promoter, doesn't necessarily understand. So they may say yes to what you've asked, but it might not be what you actually wanted. So it is all about talking about it. And it varies from, I mean, we've got here in our village, we've got a big hall, and it's got a full set of lights. It's very good. But if you want the lights, we have to get them from the players. So nothing is a given. And you assume there's nothing, I think, and then build on that. So don't set your expectations. Just think, I need to work from scratch and build up what you want.
Thank you, Barbara. Bernard, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just after what she's just saying, Barbara was saying, and what Tom was saying earlier about this, obviously such a massive cross-section of different types of events going on, from what we see, all the data coming through, all the bookings and so on. And, you know, consequently, clearly, wherever you go, everywhere is going to be different. They've all got slightly different facilities, and getting that communication well beforehand is really important. I know this from personal experience, because I play in a band myself, and having gone to various places, you know, some have got all singing, all dancing, nothing's too much trouble. Other places they don't have a lot, but they might be, you know, sort of very enthusiastic, but they're not actually sure what they're talking about. So I think you're absolutely right, trying to just get some communication and some dialogue and understanding what it is they really do actually have. You know, somebody not quite knowing what a particular type of plug is that you need to plug in a guitar or whatever. They think they've got the right thing, but when you get there, it's not. So, you know, the old Scout adage, you know, be prepared, I think.
Thank you, Bernard. Steffi, we do actually have a video on tech, don't we? Have a resource on what tech to bring. And also, just quickly, membership for the Nrtf is free for a year at the moment, and that ends, your year starts anytime between now and the 1st of April. So if you're not a member, sign up. You can access all those resources, and there's a really good video on tech and what to bring. Steffi, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, from a scheme point of view, we are looking for shows that are technically self-sufficient and that don't then compromise the show. So I know someone put in that they can do the show without the lighting, etc., but it may then not feel as much of a performance. And our venues want things to feel like a special, great night out. So that's not to say that we're completely counting you out if you're not technically self-sufficient. As schemes, we do also have some tech, some of us do anyway, that we can lend you or hire to you, or we can coordinate that. But what that then means is that if we've got a really busy season or we've had lots of submissions to us, you not being technically self-sufficient will go against you. So just bear that in mind. That's just the reality of it. The more tech self-sufficient you are, the more confident we feel putting you into a venue and knowing that a great show is going to happen. So that's that. Somebody has asked, once you've been booked onto a menu, do you then get to talk directly to promoters? So once we know as a scheme which show we're putting into which venue, you will then be sent that venue's contact details, and we will ask you to liaise directly with each other as much as possible, keeping the scheme in the loop, because it is the venue and the artist that is there on the day doing the get-in, making sure all the chairs are right, making sure all the tech fits and everything. It's not the schemes. So yes, you do talk and work directly with the promoter once we've put together that massive jigsaw that I was talking about earlier.
Thank you. Have we got questions that were sent in, Steffi?
Yes, we do. So that tech one is one that we covered from been sent in earlier. Oh, my form's going to reload now. Here we go. So what is the order in which you need to proceed to plan a rural tour? To get ACE or any sort of arts funding, you need to prove you have some venues lined up or at least interested. But to get venues interested, your show needs to have press images, possibly a trailer, and ideally even some reviews. How do you enter this impossible cycle without making all the artists' works for free? What do you suggest? I mean, that's a great question, and it's not just an issue with rural touring, but I am going to hand this over to Nick, and also I'm hoping Stephan has something to say on this, because I know they've both been through that funding process with rural dates.
Yeah, it's a hoot sometimes, isn't it? So Arts Council are quite supportive of rural touring. They're very supportive of the Nrtf. They've been at conferences and presentations, particularly in the last year or so. You can put your rural touring dates as penciled in your tour schedule, and then there's space to, you know, explain that that's the nature of it. And when it comes to what planning and preparation have you done to date, you can speak to tours, you know, to schemes, sorry, before, you know, sort of submitting them. The way we make our shows is we have an R&D period, and I'm I've been using those R&D periods as well as for making the show to try and generate some of that material. So we've started generating like a really small little sort of teaser trailer that's really quite short, that just gives you a flavour of it. And of course, everything that you make, be that paper materials, you know, like your poster, your flyer, your image, your trailer. It could even just be a little short video of you, you know, just talking about, or the company or the artist or whoever, talking about the work. The standard of that will have a reflection on the standard of your work. So make sure that whatever you're producing is as high quality as it can be. And so yeah, it is tricky, and obviously you can't really do rural touring, and apart from, I say, certain situations, you can't really say you're going to go in for rural touring and say to the Arts Council, we've definitely got all these dates booked, because as you know, you can't book something without the money, and you've not got money. So I think it's, again, it comes to that thing of also knowing, okay, if I say to Spot On that I'd like to do 3 dates with them, but I'd normally do 5 dates in a week, where am I going to go for the other 2? And thinking about how you can work your tour, how you can program your tour. I still don't know, to be honest. I'm still working it out myself. And I think we're all aware that the way rural touring has normally worked might well change in certain ways after COVID and everything. So it needs a lot of planning. It needs time. I would say give yourself a hand and give yourself lots of time. Give yourself time to have to resubmit the bid. Give yourself time between getting your dates and actually the dates themselves happening. And also, as someone who is the director, writer, producer of a company, don't try and do it all by yourself, because it's actually quite a lot of work and it's quite a lot of time. And it's very, very nice to have someone else when you go, what are we doing? How do I do this? What shall I do? It's great to have that person, and particularly on the road as well. I don't think that probably really answers it, because it's quite hard to answer, but hopefully that's a bit helpful.
Well, that's great, Nick, thank you. And also schemes, they program quite a lot in advance, so that does give you some of that time. Stephan, did you want to come in? And then Chris has got his hand up. So Stephan, did you want to come in on that? So if he's still here. No, that's okay. Chris, you've got your hand up.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Hello. I was just going to say, one thing as a touring theatre company that we found invaluable for rural touring is to take LED lights, which draw very little power, as we have in previous incarnations, blown fuses, etc. So that was just a bit of advice, really. If you can tour LED lighting, then 13 amps will be fine wherever you go.
Great tip, thank you, Chris. Stephan, you are here.
So sorry, I had to jump on my phone because my internet's been cut off rather helpfully. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fabulous. I think Nick answered very comprehensively there. The only things that occur to me are that, yes, we use R&D in the same way, always intending that to market the show for a forthcoming tour as much as develop the ideas, take it as an opportunity to invite promoters to any shared work in progress showings, in the knowledge that, as Tom was saying, you're hoping you're making work that is quite surprising, and to see a glimpse of that will be so much better than any amount of copy and still imagery. But yes, making a short trailer has been a very useful tool. And then in the planning, that at least the Arts Council acknowledge that it's provisional until it's confirmed. And my experience is that a scheme will say, yes, we'll have 3 dates. And what tends to happen is the specific venues might change for X, Y, or Z reason, but they're very good about being supportive in the knowledge that you're going to be in Dorset or wherever for a week. We'll take 3 dates, even if that specific village hall changes. And then in terms of tour planning, my tours have always been complemented by touring to studio theatres, other venues off the rural touring circuits. But as I said at the beginning, then you get into very scary financial situations with box office splits, which are less reliable than guarantees. Sorry to repeat that point. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephan. Steffi, and then there's a great question from Mark and a great question from Caroline after as well.
Yeah, so this might touch on those two questions as well. As a programmer, if I've had a chance to see your work beforehand, not necessarily the show you're about to come up with, possibly a show you've done before, that really helps me because we have to take into account so many different moving parts with rural touring. It obviously helps to see the work beforehand. Obviously, that's not always possible. We do write letters of support for people who are planning tours and putting in ACE applications. But that, generally speaking, is for people we've worked with before because we can know we can trust them. Or if it's a project that we've had a real good discussion with the artists about in advance. So the first time a company comes to me, even if I've never heard of them before, never seen any of their work, if they've given me a call and said, we'd really like to talk to you about this project, here's how it works, and they can show that they understand rural touring and they can show why that project or show is going to work for me, then I will write a letter of support if I can fit it into my seasons. Obviously, somebody has asked about when is touring going to start again. The world is upside down at the moment. We are currently looking at autumn seasons. They will be smaller than normal seasons would have been. But normally we do work up to a year in advance with programming for rural touring because venues are so busy, the rural venues are so busy with all of their events. So to get those dates into those rural venues and to take into account the fact that we understand companies are looking for funding and that they have to work that far in advance. So if you're now looking to tour with us, come to us about not just this autumn, but autumn 22, spring 22 and beyond as well. We work on those long timelines and have those long conversations with artists. I think that's covered the two things. Reviews are really helpful, but what's even more helpful often to me is a recommendation from a fellow programmer, similar scheme, similar size venue, and that kind of thing, because it's about not just knowing that the show is excellent, but that it will work in the rural spaces and in the setup that rural touring has.
Thanks, Steph. The rural touring family is really small. Everybody knows each other. So if you know one scheme, you can ask them to recommend you onwards, because we all keep in very close communications with each other, and everyone knows each other really, really well, which is one of the lovely things of rural touring. Also, schemes are really hopeful about opening their doors, as are promoters as well. Promoters are cautious on behalf of their local communities, obviously, and one of our lovely promoters might want to talk about that. But also there's quite a bit of online and digital work happening, and offline, but not in person, like plays by phone, plays by postcard. And everyone is really hopeful about outdoor work happening, if possible later in the year, summer, autumn. So if you've got something that's adaptable for outdoors, and I think that is something to bear in mind. Is there more questions, Steffi? Tom, do you want to come in? Go for it.
I was just going to reply to Caroline's put a little note in the chat about you've discussed the artists applying for Arts Council project funding, but do village halls sometimes apply to Arts Council for funding too to present shows? I think probably the answer is no, Caroline. But I have put on a children's show in the past, which, you know, I couldn't charge. I would normally charge £10 a ticket to see something in my hall. And bear in mind, if there's a capacity of about 70, that's £700 I can get through the door if I sell out. So for a children's show, you can't charge that much. So I actually got some sponsorship from a local firm, a bit like Bernard is helping with us this evening, and they gave me £250, which allowed me to basically break even because I wanted to put on the children's show. So I think there are creative ways in which halls might be able to pull in money from elsewhere, but probably not from the Arts Council.
Can I just follow up and ask on that? Why not from the Arts Council? If you would say I wanted to do a three gig thing to bring the community together, you know, invigorate, you know, I don't know, social isolation or something. Has there been a particular directive for that under £15,000 project?
Not that I'm aware of. It's probably someone just having the energy and the time and the inclination and perhaps the bravery to sort of do that, because that's kind of grown up territory. Whereas most village halls, obviously, and promoters are volunteers. So I think it's, you know, there's absolutely no directive or any sense from the Arts Council that you can't apply. I'm involved in a music festival in my village as well. Every year over a long weekend, about sort of 4,000 people come along, and we apply to the Arts Council to put on to get money to do that. So I guess just from a village hall perspective, put on a show in a village hall or to put on 2 or 3 shows, probably it's just kind of territory that hasn't been explored. But you might find the occasional kind of ambitious, you know, person that's got a little bit of time and perhaps understanding of the sector as well, might be prepared to do that. I'm just saying, from my experience, I'm not aware of anyone having done that, and I haven't done it myself.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Just to jump in on that one, just to reiterate that the schemes are Arts Council funded, so the funding to subsidise tours that the artists apply for, that doesn't mean that they won't then receive a fee for the show in the village halls. So, for example, at Spot On, we work on a tier system. Gosh, it feels like such a long time since we actually programmed something. I'm having to remind myself. We work on a tier system with our venues, but from an artist point of view, if you tell us that your show costs £600, you will get that £600. The way that we then work with the venues about that finance differs from scheme to scheme. But as an artist, if you tell us that your show costs £600, that's what you'll get. Obviously, your show might actually be costing you £1,000 a time to put on, but you've got that Arts Council funding to subsidise that other £400. And it's also a good point here to jump in and say, rural touring does happen without schemes. There are some areas of the UK not covered by a scheme where a venue and artist will work directly with one another. So that might be that there's some venues used to going out and booking artists and programming artists themselves, and those venues might have got ACE funding themselves, or they might work on more of a box office split. And also artists do occasionally privately book a village hall themselves. What you're then getting with that private booking is you're not getting that promoter who is on the ground invested in selling tickets and getting that hall full. It's slightly different. So that's where the joy of a scheme comes in, is that you've got those 3 sets of people all working to make sure that there's a huge audience, it's a great show, and that everyone has a great experience. But it does happen without us. And it happens very successfully without us as well in places. So the models are different. But if there's a scheme in an area, it's a good idea just to let them know what you're planning, because they might be able to help in other ways.
Thank you, Steffi. Bernard, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just again, sort of echoing what Tom was saying again, going back to Caroline's point about local businesses and sponsorship. Putting it bluntly, a lot of businesses are very keen to help, and I'm not sure personally of your experience with the sort of arts councils and so on, but I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of people applying, whereas there won't be too many people applying to local businesses, either for financial help or even if it's the likes of a building contractor or Jewson's and you need some paint for a backdrop or whatever. I mean, it might be you just need a plug or you know, something like that. You might have local tradespeople, electricians and so on, able and willing to help and you know, donate their time. So, you know, for the sake of holding your nerve and picking up the phone, I think you might be pleasantly surprised, to be quite honest. Certainly from a business point of view, be very happy to look good in the community, if you like, and be able to help. So I think that's where you need that connection with the actual venues themselves. And you might go along and say, look, we've got a children's show to put on, but we're struggling for funds. And they may turn around and say, well, actually, we've got a really good relationship with a local builder, etc. They're able to help build a stage for you, or whatever it is. But I think it's certainly worth putting a hand up and picking the phone up or emailing them and just ask.
Yeah, great, thank you, Bernard. We've got Barbara and then David Lane.
Yeah, just wanted to add to what Steffi was saying about the schemes, and really it can't be underestimated or not shouted loudly enough from the rooftops about how good the schemes are about making all this happen, particularly from the financial point of view. I promoted for 10 years and it's always scary as a volunteer promoter to do that without any backing at all. And once the rural touring scheme, just to have that, even if it's only a safety net, it is such a huge thing to have as a volunteer promoter. If you're doing it as your job, you take the rough with the smooth, but when there's a chance that you could have financial loss yourself to put a show on, it is quite a scary thing. And so I think, really the schemes need to be applauded for what they managed to do, because they have to get the funding and be able to give the performers their fee, but also to give the promoters the peace of mind. It doesn't make the promoters work any less for the show. That's the other brilliant part about it. They still work just as hard for the show and for the performers, but it just makes it so much easier to put on a show.
Yeah, quite right, Barbara. Thank you. David.
I'm just picking up on what Bernard said about getting local sponsorship. You're quite right, it is there. But a typical promoter has got an awful lot of balls up in the air and probably won't have time to do that. So I think it was Wendy who said earlier, it's really important as a promoter to have a strong and skilled team supporting you. Some village halls do run on their own, but if you want to maximize the opportunities and do that, get the right skills on board, have a really strong team.
Just quickly jumping in there's a couple of questions in the chat, and there was one submitted on the forms about how schemes take submissions from artists. It's totally different scheme to scheme almost. Schemes work a lot like venues do, so if you're booking with venues, you'll know that they have different processes. And their timelines are slightly different. But as a rule, we all program an autumn and a spring season. Now, the best thing you can do is that I've just popped a link in the chat that shows you the list of all the schemes registered with the Nrtf, and take a look at their individual websites. Some will have a very specific form that they want you to fill in, telling you all about their show. But others, for example, at Spot On, we'll take an email with your tour pack. What I would say is get that tour pack ready and robust and filled with everything we could need, because then if you do have to pull that information out your tour pack to fill in a particular schemes form, at least all that information is there. And there is a resource on the Nrtf site that tells you what we would like to see in that tour pack, which again is the same kind of thing as what people will ask for on a scheme form. And I think what would be really helpful for a lot of people here is after this call is finished, I'll put together an email and send it all out with you with direct links to things that will help, because there's no way we can cover everything in this session. If you are finding that you're not getting response from people, at the moment, a lot of people are furloughed, but do give schemes a call. The art of getting a phone call is dying even more so at the moment, and have a chat to make sure that you're emailing the right person. Some schemes are huge and have huge amounts of staff working for them. Others are just one person that only works 1 day a week. So having that phone call and making sure you're going through to the right person is invaluable. But yes, that's everything I think I can fit in this time. If you're a rural venue on this call looking to find out how to become a promoter, again, take a look at the schemes, see if there's one in your area, and give them a call, and they will tell you how they onboard new promoters. But we're always looking for new people to join us. Again, it will depend on geographical location, and to some extent, how we work with different venues depends on what funding we have for working in different areas. But in Lancashire, we're welcome to anyone in Lancashire who has a space, or even who doesn't have a space but would like to get involved, just give us a call as well. You're on mute, Holly.
Thank you, Steffi. We are out of time, but please do send in any questions or anything that hasn't been answered for you, and we will try and get to those as quickly as possible. I'm going to finish on something that a scheme director said at one of our sessions, who is a well-seasoned and since retired. And she said the difference between black box touring and rural touring is that in a black box theatre, the artist invites the audience to come and see their show. And in a rural touring venue, it is the community and the audience who are inviting the artist to come and to perform to their neighbours and friends and family. And that is a really amazing distinction between the types of touring that we've been talking about and touring that you might be used to before as well. I'm going to end by saying thank you very much to Bernard and Hallmaster. Thank you very much to Arts Council England for their support. Thank you to our guest speakers and all the advice. Thank you to my team, and thank you all of you for coming. It's been wonderful to have you here, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care, everybody. Happy Village Halls Week. Thank you to ACA.